up to this point, we have brought in three different images. We've made masks from selections, and we've added adjustment layers to darken the image. Remember, we're trying to take these overall images and match the style of that to the feel that we're going for. So in this case, we're going for a dark, moody vibe for this photo. So therefore, we're adding these adjustment layers to match all the lighting up and to give us that overall dark feel. Remember, we're also adding clipping masks to these adjustment layers, so that way it only affects the layer directly below it. If I remove that clipping mask, it's going to affect everything below it. So we only want it to affect just the layer below it. So for example, levels 2 is affecting just mountains, not mountains and clouds. Levels 3 is affecting just the wolf, not the wolf, the mountains, and the clouds. Because of that clipping mask, it allows us to apply that adjustment layer to just the image or layer below, directly below it. All right, let's go ahead and continue with this. We need to go ahead and bring in some fog, and from the assets that we downloaded earlier, there was a brush titled Fog Brushes. So we're going to go ahead and use those fog brushes. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my brush tool. I'm going to go ahead and go to my brush settings. If you don't have brush settings over here, like I don't, you're going to go to Window, you're going to go to Brush Settings, and there it is, our brush settings. We're going to add to the brush tip shape, scattering, and dynamics. So for scattering, we're going to bring that scatter up to about somewhere around 93%. You can basically see it alternates the pattern in which the fog that brush stroke will show up. So there's 0 scattering, and we're going to bring that up to about 90 or so percent. And then that's it for the scattering. For shape dynamics, we add size jitter. You'll see again, it just kind of alternates the size. Bring that up to about 10%. And then the angle jitter just basically rotates the brush. So we'll do that. And there's a bunch of other brush tip settings that you can place in there. And then obviously my size will vary the size, but the spacing you can see, you can also vary the spacing as well for that. And I will leave this about 20%, somewhere around there. With those settings, we're going to go ahead and grab a mid-level gray, which is going to be in the blue hue, because we want those blue undertones with that fog, because this is dark and gloomy, so we want those cooler colors. We certainly wouldn't want in the reds, so blue, some mid-level gray, somewhere in there. And now we can just go ahead and paint in our fog. Now also our opacity is down to about 20%, blend mode normal, opacity 20%, flow is 20%, and that's just going to allow us to paint in this area. Now, one last thing, as I've kind of accidentally painted on my levels, I need to add another layer. So this layer of fog was going to live on its own, so we're going to create a new layer, call this fog, and on the fog layer is where we'll paint that brush at 20%, flow 20%. And then we don't want to cover the dog, this wolf or dog's face. We just want to kind of, because it's, if you think three-dimensionally, his nose is going to be peering out of this darkness. So we're going to cover pretty much everything else. I just think of this fog kind of in the background, if you will. In fact, we probably could have named this fog background. So I'm going to click and drag and create that fog effect. There we go. Looks pretty good right about there. So we'll leave that there. And then we'll go ahead and move on to the next edit. So we're going to bring in our hikers. So we'll go ahead and mix this down. Let's go ahead and go into our documents. We're looking for, here's our desktop, wolf edit. And then I'll go ahead and go from this period. And again, we're looking for our hikers. Okay, so that's going to be the wolf edit hikers. And then let me go ahead and I want to change the way this looks. Let's go with large icons. There we go. All right, so again, we want the wolf edit hikers. I'm just going to click, drag this over. Remember, if you are not able to drag the image over, you'll need to open this in Photoshop and drag that from its original layers, like we did the Chris Pratt and the monkey project, if you remember that. All right, so there's my image. I can't really see where I'm placing this, so I'm going to go ahead and change this opacity down to about 20% or so I can see. And basically, I want this part of the cliff here just under the dog's nose. I'm going to zoom out just a little bit to give me a little more space. And then we'll go ahead and stretch this to fit right in here. That looks to be good right about there. We'll bring this opacity back to 100%. Click on the check mark to accept it or hit enter. And now we can go ahead and continue to manipulate this layer, which we are going to call cliff. And we'll go ahead and make our selection of the background. Increase my quick selection brush tool here. So again, we're going to go ahead and make that selection there. I can invert that, so Control I. Sorry, I misspoke there. We need to select the foreground, not the background. Sorry about that. So Control D to deselect, back to my quick selection brush. And we're going to go ahead and paint the foreground, not the background. Just get that as close as you can, because we can always go back in and change up or re-edit the mask, because that's ultimately what we're doing here is we're going to make a mask out of this. Control 0 to snap back in here. Control minus to snap back just a little bit. Looking pretty good. And from here, we're going to click at the bottom of our layers panel where the square and circle is. This is our layer mask, just like we did with the mountains and the wolf. And now we have created a mask based off of our selection. And then with the paintbrush, we're going to go ahead and grab that black color, change my brush back to a soft round. Put it back here. And a soft round is what we want. And I'll make my brush a little bit smaller. And then we just want to go to my layer mask here for the cliff. We need to change our opacity back to 100%, our flow to 100%, and now we can go ahead and kind of clean this up. If your brush is too soft, remember you can right-click and increase the hardness to kind of tidy that up a little bit. So there we go. And we're just kind of cleaning this up just a little bit. And if you've really made some mistakes, you can certainly zoom in and really get detailed with that mask. Just again cleaning that up a little bit. All right, there we go. Again, we need to darken this, so we're going to go ahead and bring in an adjustment layer for cliff. So we're going to click on adjustments. We're going to go ahead and do levels. And for this levels, we're going to go ahead and change our settings from 0. And then our second one is going to be 0.55. And our third one is going to be left at 255 for our output levels. We're going to leave that at 0. And our other one is at 70. Again, this is making all of the image dark, so we want to go ahead and right-click, click on Create Clipping Mask. Now we've only affected the cliff. Looking pretty good there. All right, we want to go ahead and bring in another adjustment layer because right now the levels is affecting everything. So we're going to bring in a type of adjustment layer that's called curves. Now curves allows you to change the highlights and shadows, and so it just offers you another opportunity to affect the way that that particular layer works or looks. So again, there's another adjustment layer, and the way adjustment layers work is you basically click on this line, and you kind of move up and down. And what people generally do is use what's called an S-curve, and that appropriately changes the highlights and shadows in the way that you want. So we'll kind of keep that S-curve about like that. Move this up just a little bit. Nice soft S-curve there. Again, this is affecting all the layers, so I don't want that. I want just this to affect the clip. So again, right click on that adjustment layer and create clipping mask. There we go. Now the area that we're going to illuminate with our Explorer is going to be right in here. So right now this is way too dark, so we can kind of remove some of these adjustments in our curves on the mask here. So again, I'm going to select the thumbnail for my curves. I'm going to go back to my brush. We're going to go ahead and grab our black, and then we're just going to go ahead and paint in this area here. So let me zoom in so we can see that. I'm just going to paint in this area here where we're going to illuminate this with our brush. So you can see this instantly starts to lighten up that area where our hiker or explorer is going to be. Beautiful. There we go. Looking a lot better. All right. There we go. All right. Next step is we're going to go ahead and bring in our Explorer. So let's go ahead and jump back into our Finder panel, and we're looking for the Wolf Edit Catacomb Torch. So we're going to go ahead and click and drag and pull this guy in. Again, if you can't click and drag and bring them in, you need to open it in Photoshop and then drag it from its original layers. I'm going to back out just a little bit so I can see this, and obviously from the first look at this, we can see that our Explorer is a little too big. So again, we're going to go ahead and drop the opacity so we can see where we're placing it, and then we'll go ahead and stretch to make this a lot smaller. That looks good to be a little smaller. There we go, right up there. That looks good. Again, we'll hit enter to accept that. We're going to bring our opacity back up to 100%. We'll go ahead and zoom in. There we go. And then again, we want to make our selection, make this background go away. So with the Wolf Edit Catacomb Torch copy layer selected, we're going to go ahead and again change that to reflect what it is, which we'll call this Explorer. And with the Explorer layer selected, we'll go ahead and select just the subject matter. Now again, you can use either any of the selection tools, or you can let Photoshop do it by clicking on Select and Subject. And this will select just our subject, at least how it sees it. And then from here, we'll go ahead and again make a mask from that selection, and we obviously need to make some adjustments here. So I'll go ahead and grab my paintbrush. I'll go ahead and grab the white color because we want to reveal, we're kind of missing some information here. So I'll go ahead and my brush is up here. We're painting white to reveal part of this. I'm missing some of his leg there, missing part of his head here, and then we'll go back to black because we obviously need to get rid of some information. So we'll go ahead and paint in our mask here. And we'll zoom into our Explorer, and again, just kind of tidy up and fix what we're wanting to get rid of, which is part of this torch here. So any pixels that we don't want, we can make those adjustments with black and white, whether bringing information back in or getting rid of some information. It's looking pretty good. We'll leave this glow of this torch here because it just kind of, well, you'll see here once we get a little deeper into this edit. So just clean this up a little bit. Looking pretty good. I think we're ready for the next step. All right, looking pretty good. Now he's already appearing as if he's in the dark, so we'll leave him as it is. We could add another adjustment layer of some sorts to kind of make him a little more matchy-matchy, but I think he's looking pretty good there. Let's go ahead and add our glow effect. So we'll add a new layer. We're going to call this Torch. We're going to go ahead and grab our brush tool. We're going to change that color to a very bright orange. It looks good to be right about there. And we're going to go ahead and change our opacity. We'll drop this opacity down to about 15% or so. And then our flow, we'll drop that down as well, around the same. And then we want to go ahead and make our brush a lot bigger. Excuse me. And then because we're kind of illuminating this area, that light's gonna kind of shine on the dog's nose here. So we kind of need to make some adjustments before we go forward. So we're gonna go ahead and jump into the wolf levels 3, and then we're gonna go ahead and paint on that mask. We need to kind of bring in area right here with the dog's nose. So I need to ramp my opacity back up to 100%. And then we'll just kind of paint in this area, and it's just his nose that's kind of peeking in, so it's just this area here that we're gonna show the reflection. I need to be careful because his tail is a little further back, so I don't need light over there, so I'm gonna go ahead and switch back to my black to get rid of that. There you go. Now it gives that illusion of his nose peeking into the light. All right, so I can go back to my torch layer. Again, I'm gonna drop that opacity back to about 15% or so. We have that bright orange selected, and then we're going to go ahead and increase the size of our brush here, and then we'll just kind of bring that light in. We can zoom in to the area of below his feet, and we can kind of paint in that light just ever so much right here. There we go. Looking pretty good. And then lastly, well, almost lastly, we got a couple more edits to adjust here. We're going to zoom into the dog's or wolf's eyes, and let's go ahead and add some reflective light in those eyes. That would certainly make this a lot more natural. We need to ramp up our opacity back up to 100%, our flow back up to 100%, and our brush needs to get really small here, and we'll just kind of paint that torch in there and make the brush a little smaller on this other eye since it's a little further away. Crazy there. And there we go. And then lastly, we just need to add another fog layer in here in our foreground because that other fog is kind of in the background. So let's go fog foreground. And again, go back to that mid-level gray and those blue tones. Grab that brush head, which was, I believe it was fog 8. That brush a lot smaller. I am going to go back to my brush settings. I want to make sure that I have those adjustments set so that, yep, there we go, shape dynamics, scattering, and then we're going to bring that up to about 90%. About 33%, I think, with this way. Off it just a little bit. There you go. The scattering was about 80%, 90%. Shape dynamic was angle jitter and size jitter. There we go. And now I'm just going to paint in the foreground. Ooh, that's a little too bright. So we need to make sure we drop that opacity and the flow down. So again, opacity about 20%, flow about 20%. And again, on the fog foreground layer, we're going to go ahead and paint in that fog. Just bring that fog in on the foreground. Make it look a little more realistic, a little more dark and gloomy. There we go. And there's our composition. Now we could obviously go a little bit more in detail and continue to make some adjustments, but I think this gives you a good example of how to make that more advanced composition. Again, none of these tools are anything new. A lot of this is just rinse and repeat as far as bringing in our images, adding adjustments to match up the colors, whether it's making it lighter, making it darker, and then of course using our brush tool to kind of bring in some visual effects, using the masking tool to get rid of some foregrounds or backgrounds, however you might need. But ultimately, that's just diving a little bit deeper into what has already been taught throughout the year.